How are you this morning? Heine P, which is good morning in Ho-Chunk. And I understand you had the pleasure of meeting our chief, Clayton Winishik. Yes. Oh, he's awesome. I was telling folks upstairs, I asked how the meeting or how his speech went yesterday, and I heard really good responses from folks walking around upstairs. And one of them was, wow, he's kind of a modern chief. And I said, he has to be. He's got all these modern issues with the digital world of our kids. Lots of really cool hair colors, whether or not those hair colors are clan correct, because we have colors in each of our clans. Lots of piercing questions and many other questions that chief has to answer. So we always appreciate a modern, chief that's approachable. So I'm glad he was here yesterday. I am way, way, way below the chief status. I'm a worker bee. As Sarah, and thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. As Sarah mentioned, I'm a tribal member of Ho-Chunk. My father is Oneida from the Oneida tribe, originally from New York in Canada. He was part of a descendancy of group of folks, about 400 Oneidas left New York and Canada, an Episcopalian group that left on foot and traveled westward. They didn't have a home, and thanks to the Menominee Nation, Menominee agreed to give up part of its reservation at that time in the 1830s to the Oneida tribe, this faction of the Oneida tribe, to make a home in Wisconsin. And so they settled in Oneida, which is right next to Green Bay. So the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin is now a separate tribe in Wisconsin, and my dad descends from that group. And I grew up on that reservation. And my mom is Ho-Chunk, grew up in Black River Falls and other areas. So I am enrolled at Ho-Chunk. And it's always important, I think, and Sarah, I appreciate you acknowledging the land we're on. I have been a longtime resident of this area of Madison for, more than 25 years. I've practiced law for 19 years now, most of which has been here in Madison. And it has been such a pleasure to watch this community grow and embrace Ho-Chunk culture. And even being in this place in Monona Terrace, right behind me, there's an intersection that has actually a lizard effigy mound underneath the intersection that's preserved. And there's lots of Indian mounds, thousands and thousands of Indian mounds along this isthmus that you're sitting on right now that are full of medicine and power. And they were meant to be here for us, for future inhabitants, to give us this medicine and to guide us in this space while we're here. So acknowledging the land we're on, there is a lot more to it. And I always say, if you think about the Indian mounds in this area, and I encourage all of you, if we're talking about connecting the human experience to the land and to nature, is to connect to how nature has been left here for us intentionally by things above and beyond humans. And in this case, and in this space, Indian mounds, research what those are, research what types there are, where they're located, and really check out what we call indigenuity, the smarts behind their cardinal directions, what they stand for and what they do and why they're here. I think that really is important. If you're here in Madison, I always say, what is going on locally here that somebody didn't necessarily build, with brick and mortar. What is here for us? What was left here for us and meant for us to see and experience? And that is one of the most, enunciated pieces of, I'll call it medicine, that is here for you, even being guest visitors, or if you're inhabitants of Dejope, Four Lakes here in Madison. So I encourage you to be connected to what that means here. And again, I say these mounds rival, the pyramids of Giza. They are that special. The things that have been discovered over the years, even through science and archaeology, and I've had the pleasure of working for my own tribe, Ho-Chunk, in preserving many, many, many sites throughout Wisconsin, most of which include Indian mounds, including a case that went to the Wisconsin Supreme Court involving a ready mix company that wanted to destroy a mound to access the resources, the millions of dollars of resources under the mounds right here in Madison. So they're still in constant threat. And they're very important to enjoy while they're here and to create that culture of respect and understanding, and hopefully become stewards of the land and help protect them as we move forward in our civil services. So yes, thank you, Sarah. I have been practicing law for quite a while. I'm very grateful. We talk about Indian gaming, tribal casinos and whatnot. I'm a product of that. I would never be a lawyer, a national lawyer, former judge, and all of the prestigious awards and credentials I was able to achieve without Indian gaming. My entire law career was funded by the Ho-Chunk Nation through Indian gaming profits. So when you look at casinos and you hear anything bad about them, know that it's probably not true. These are government-run enterprises, and that money goes into things like education and economic development and turning the lights on, making sure we have clean water. And they are wonderful economic development drivers. And I before you, I have to say, that is how I got where I'm at, is through gaming monies and through tribal leadership. And I want to acknowledge tribal leadership today. We have my representative from Madison, Sarah Lemieux, Representative Lemieux, District 3. She has one of the toughest districts to represent, Madison, Milwaukee, and a big chunk of Wisconsin. A lot of us urban Indians, as they call us, we're a handful. So thank you, Sarah, for signing up for a second term and continuing to represent us. So welcome to Dajope. Folks don't really know that sometimes when you're in a space of a tribe that doesn't actually have a reservation, for example, Madison, Dajope is not a reservation land or a reservation land of Ho-Chunk Nation, but it's within a massive footprint of our ancestral homelands. And so if we speak about rights of nature, we have to speak about where does the rights of nature obligations come from? Where does that come from? And in Indigenous peoples, as you all probably know, because you're a special group of people who care about nature and care about the human experience with nature, you know that it comes from that land tide. I call it land tiedness. How are we land tied? What is that connection there that needs to be nurtured? How do we strengthen it? How do we discover it? How do we study it? How do we make it better? How do we make it stronger? How do we relearn it? All of these things are incessant issues and priorities for Indigenous nations across the world. And they have been removed from their lands. They have been subject to acts of genocide. Their resources have been depleted right before their eyes. They have been lost a lot of their cultural bearings, and their teachings seem somewhat even inapplicable once you remove them from their lands. So now that we are in an era in 2024 where Indigenous peoples are making a lot of progress, in reconnecting, recovering, getting quote unquote land back, which is another campaign, asking for private citizens, governments, and corporations to be considerate of all of the historical trauma to Indigenous peoples, and also to value that indigeneity about that land stewardship, that connection, those folks that still have the story of the blueprint of all of these lands, including the land you're sitting on now. Who are the people who have been taking care of this land for 10, 20, 30,000 years? And they are still around. They're still occupying those homelands. And why do we not tap into their knowledge? Why do we not learn and nurture those? Why don't we give them a 5-acre parcel, or a half an acre, or 500-acre parcel back to reconnect, to relearn, to restudy, right? These are all things that are all in progress. But I'm here to talk about one thing specific, and one thing that I've had the pleasure to learn on the job. I actually get paid to learn how to do rights of nature. One of my clients, and just so you know, I represent dozens of tribal nations, tribal organizations, nonprofits that aren't tribal at all, that are allies. And we need allies to do all of these things that I mentioned. This agenda of renewing our connection with nature it's all about allyship, right? Learning how to be a good ally, and learning all the ins and outs, being uncomfortable a lot of the time, right? It's very uncomfortable. I've spent my career in a sea of non-native men. I'm usually the only woman in the room, and I'm usually the only brown person in the room. So I have made my career out of being absolutely uncomfortable 99% of the time. And I encourage you to do the same. And somehow the uncomfortableness never goes away. But you learn these skill sets. You learn how to be creative. You learn a little bit of wittiness, a little bit of humor, and you learn to make really good friends that you normally wouldn't have access to. And I think that's the part that I probably enjoy the most. But let's talk about the rights of nature. Let's talk about the rights of nature. Who has heard of the rights of nature before, out of curiosity? Who has been an ally and stood up and tried to do something in the rights of nature? Who came here to learn one thing so they can do something with the rights of nature? Okay, every hand should be up. Hello. Come on, I know you might be on your first cup of coffee, but by the end of this talk, I think I can convince you, because I get paid to convince people to do things. So what is it? What is this rights of nature? Well, I will let you know if you are not paying attention. I have so much to share with you. There is so much going on by the minute My inbox has probably got another update in it right now since I've been up here at the podium. The movement is about protecting nature through legal personhood. Legal personhood. Now, I could take Sarah one block away from us, and we can go down and we can file and create a state LLC, a state chartered LLC. It could be Acme Company LLC, and Sarah Lemieux and Samantha Skenandore can be the owners. And once we walk out of that building and that company is in existence, it has personhood. It has corporate rights. We can create basically a human being out of a business idea in a matter of minutes under current law. But the tree that's next to us, or the entire ecosystem, or the Yahara watershed that you are sitting within right now, does not have anything close to legal personhood. And there isn't a lawyer, even as good as myself, that can go convince the state government or the federal government to extend legal rights to the Yahara rivershed, right? The law just isn't there, right? So the idea behind the rights of nature is to find the right way, the best way to extend legal rights to our pieces of nature. It could be a sentient living being, it could be a species, it could be a watershed, it could be an entire traditional cultural property. However which way that space or that thing, and I don't like to call it resources, it's so tricky. When we call them natural resources, it's to me better to call that nature than a resource, because resource implies what? Yes, it's here for us, right? It's meant for us to consume and do what we want. It's our property, right? Resources are meant for the human race. So the idea, there's some key principles behind rights of nature. And I'm not telling you anything new. This is not something Samantha Skenandore came up with. There are decades and decades and generations, and actually as I'm learning, tribe by tribe, that are passing these laws when they dig deep into their records, into their traditional knowledge, into their traditions and customs and their oral history, and they talk to their elders. These laws have very much been in place for many, many centuries, right? And they're learning, how do we apply that law when we don't have our land, right? That's the question of the day for Indigenous people, when we don't have all of our homelands. And for example, for Ho-Chunk, our ancestral footprint is north of Green Bay, including the Minneapolis-St. Paul cities area, south of Dubuque, stretching eastward into Indiana and Ohio, all the way up through Chicago, Milwaukee. That's the original ancestral homeland of Ho-Chunk. Now, if Ho-Chunk want to do rights of nature, do you know how difficult all the jurisdictional issues, the politics, the courts, right? Who's sitting on the courts, who's going to interpret those laws? There's a lot of work to be done if we wanted to extend one species the rights of nature in our ancestral homeland. Well, we don't own our ancestral homeland. We own bits and pieces of it here and there. So we have to be creative on how do we do big impact if that's what the nation wants to do, right? But these principles are based on that nature has an inherent right and should flourish. It should have the similar protections as human beings do and as corporations. This is also an evolution of modern day property and consumer rights, because what we see with modern day property and consumer rights is that they are quite honestly not sustainable. They're just not sustainable. And I want to emphasize that because your generation and the children that you are raising in this effort to reconnect with nature and support nature, this is the agenda in front of them. This is the task in front of them. In fact, I've been stalked and invited internationally to talk about the rights of nature. I'll be meeting with the World Economic Forum in Hamburg, Germany in November to talk about this very topic, the same things we're talking about today. Why would the World Economic Forum care about the rights of nature, you ask, right? Well, as a real estate attorney, we are always seeing evolutions and changes within the law around property. And again, I just said the evolution of modern day property is not sustainable. Well, our economists are looking at that same problem. They've been looking at it. So when they do their 4 years of conferencing on any one subject area, and these expert economists across the world are looking at the economy and they're saying, okay, what is the latest and greatest that we need to white paper, we need to study, we need to peer review when it comes to property? And they say the lack of natural resources, the doom of the economy coming. Because if we cannot build this building, if we cannot get the materials to build this building, what's the value of those materials? Does it go up or go down? You know, microeconomics, right? Simple methodologies. And so these experts, and I've seen some of their unpublished papers, all point to the question that they were asked. Is the rights of nature laws sustainable? Is it viable in our economy? because it's been poo-pooed by all of corporate America, right? This is something that has been kept at bay for decades. So the question is it even viable? And these experts, independent economists, are coming back with a resoundingly yes. It's not only viable, it is necessary for all governments on all levels to move towards rights of nature laws. We look at indigenous communities also and how they're experiencing climate change. This has also put a spark underneath them. We are looking at some of the nations that are coastal with rising temperatures and sea levels. Their food sources are completely going away. We are losing 100 to 200 species a day in this world. So we are very concerned climate changes are affecting our species, which ultimately affect our food sources, which affect our economy, which affect our quality of life. And we also add one more principle to that. Well, we have tribal nations, we have indigenous nations worldwide. Tribes are not exclusive to the United States. They're all over the world. They're indigenous peoples from every country, every corner. Some are still alive practicing their languages quietly. Some are not afforded their sovereignty rights or their ability to make laws and be governed by them. But they do exist, and they are networking. They are networking quickly to bring back that knowledge. The ones that do have the sovereignty intact, like U.S. tribes in this particular country, it makes sense that they would be the first people to step up and start adopting rights of nature laws and working to enforce them. Working to set the stage so that they couldn't be enforced and not shot down, right? But to move them forward and start this and renew their connection with their homelands, rediscover what environmental stewardship looks like in 2024, set up these things called guardian roles, guardians. When we have guardian roles, who's heard of guardian ward, right? And competencies, right? We have people, human beings, that are not able to act in their best interests. So the law affords for a guardian ward scenario where somebody, a qualified attorney or expert, can speak on behalf of this other human being for their best interests. Now that model already exists in the law, right? So this has been the preferred model for nature. So how does it work? And let's talk about this. In the United States, nature is treated as property. Nature possesses little to no rights for itself. Current environmental laws fall very short of protection. Think about the Endangered Species Act. Why doesn't that work? Those species have to be almost obliterated before it even applies to them, right? That doesn't work. Nature is unable to advocate for itself in this prominent adversarial system. So our courts are adversarial. It's always one side versus the other, right? And somebody's got to win. Somebody's looking for a W. It's adversarial. Second, unlike incapacitated humans, nature is not afforded legal services or representation unless it involves the value of human property or consumerism. And generally, when nature suffers damages, humans or corporations are the ones that are entitled to the relief, the money. Oh, there was a toxic spill. Well, somebody got millions of dollars. Somebody, some corporation, some property owner got millions of dollars. And were they under any obligation to restore that environment or nature? Oftentimes they do not. They pocket that money, right? That's the win. That's the big W they're looking for. So that's where the repercussions, restitution, even if they make it that far to a judgment and an award or relief, it goes to a human being or a corporation, not to nature. So what rights of nature laws do is they create something called standing. And when you're a lawyer, you know you can't just take anything, any argument to court. You have to have standing. That court has to be the right court for you under the subject of the issue you have, and your client, your plaintiff, has to be able to have standing. Standing means there's something in the law that gives them a right to come and make their argument before that court. And if there are no laws there, again, you won't see nature sitting in front of a court, right? The idea here then is that if you change a law and create the law, and the law affords certain rights, nature could then have standing. Typically, like anybody else who is in court, it's because you suffered some harm. And that's one of the major components in the law, is that nature has to have suffered some sort of harm. And then, of course, the person advocating for that piece of nature, portion of nature, they have to advocate it to the full extent of the law, right? They have to ask for everything and see how the court lands on it. These are all new cases, right? This is a brand new concept. So there's going to be stuff happening here that is probably not good. There's going to be some setbacks. There's going to be some bumps. And in this case, the scenario would be that the role of nature shifts from a concept of human and corporate property to an independent living entity with certain inherent legal rights, and the ones that we are seeing most in the language, they include the right to exist, thrive, flourish, regenerate, restore itself, recover, and carry on its own functions in a healthy environment. Those are the words internationally. If you interpret them from all different languages, those are the words that are constantly being picked up in these rights of nature laws across the world. Again, guardians and legal counsels will be empowered and authorized to advocate on behalf of nature under that particular law. And then nature then would be awarded the relief to be made whole, such as money, so that it could do things like restore itself. And that's what the rights of nature movement is all about. So how big is this movement, you ask? Why haven't you heard about it, right? It's massive. You can click Rights of Nature. There are many, many, many resources. There's even, I believe, a library of all of the rights of nature laws. There's watchdog groups out there. It's amazing. But I do want to give a couple of points. I know I don't have a lot of time. I could certainly talk about this for another hour, and I think you would enjoy that talk because there's so many amazing things going on. But in 2022, the United Nations General Assembly unanimously affirmed, quote unquote, a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as a human right and a right for all, not just a privilege for some. Since then, environmentalists have called upon the United Nations to grant legal rights to our oceans by 2030, in 6 short years. So you're going to see there's a lot of grassroots work in that area. They're trying to protect the oceans, and that is the next focus. 3 days ago, I received another alert that the NATO court in Peru ruled that the Moronan River, which flows from the Andes Mountains to the Amazon River, does officially have legal rights to quote unquote exist, flow, and be free from pollution. Yep, way to go, Peru. Yes, the movement is global. And when I say global, I mean that entire countries are changing their constitutions. Can you imagine if the United States changed its constitution in this regard? Right? So, for example, in 2019, Uganda passed a rights of nature law. However, some are, weaker versions of rights of nature. Some are, it's polar ends, right? Really strong versions, and some that are a little less strong, mainly even just declaratory in essence. But Uganda passed one in 2019, but they left it to the government to decide what rights of nature law would be protected. So they said, we agree, this needs to happen, but we're going to leave it to the government to decide. Court in India, they gave rights to the Ganges and the Yamuna River. So we're seeing a lot of rivers receive personhood. The court held that Mother Nature has the same legal status as human beings. However, the government appealed that ruling and they won. They overturned it. So they're back to work, right? This stuff isn't going to go away. When there's losses, we're seeing a larger movement try to correct the shortcomings. In 2017, it's probably one of the most popular, and I had the privilege of sitting on a couple of panels with folks from the Maori community, where they have the Wanganu's treaty settlement passed law in New Zealand, which recognizes the river as a living entity with full legal rights, employing 2 guardians from the Crown and 1 from the traditional people, granting legal personhood also to the national park. So Indigenous peoples are stepping up as official guardians under the law all over the country as well, using their traditional ecological knowledge around that river and space to help protect it. Colombia did something in 2016, Bolivia 2012, Ecuador in 2008. But don't leave out the big national regimes. Some of the most impactful things for rights of nature have actually been happening on the municipal level. We've had many cities across the country attempt to pass rights of nature laws, including Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which got shot down pretty quick. It didn't mean that when these things go down, we see 5 more pop up, right? So in 2024, Minnesota's the newest one. They passed a resolution recognizing the inherent rights of the Manuman, the wild rice, and seeking the government to pass legislation for the same within 2 years. So TikTok will see what Minnesota does, our neighbors here. In 2023, here in Wisconsin, Milwaukee County passed a resolution supporting the rights of nature movement across waterways. Anybody here from Milwaukee? Who's my people? Merci beaucoup. Thank you for that. Passing protections and ensuring human activities do not interfere with nature and its ability to be healthy, robust, and resilient. We have several more, and I'm happy to send on a PowerPoint to anybody who wants to see some details with some live links. Happy to do that, but I want to focus one last area for just 2 more minutes here on U.S. tribes. In 2023, a youth-led group from the Mashpee Nation. Does anybody know where Mashpee is from? Where's it from? Massachusetts, right. Remember the Pilgrim story? The Indians that received the colonists? That's the Wampanoags out on the East Coast. So they still occupy their ancestral homelands of Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod. So the Mashpee group, they're the inhabitants of Cape Cod, and the youth, very much under premises such as this gathering, were inspired to do something about their environment. So they went to tribal council with a draft resolution saying, we recognize and we have learned that our people survived on herring. And we've also learned that 96% of the population of herring in Cape Cod has been exterminated because the town of Cape Cod and the city of Massachusetts and the federal government have recreated the stairs, the ladders for the fish to go up and spawn. And these fish can't make it up the ladders. They're knocking themselves out. They're killing themselves trying to go spawn. And 96% of the population is gone. And the elders would tell the kids, oh gosh, our rivers would run black and we could live on herring all year long. And the kids still net and fish and eat herring. And they said, we want this back. What can we do? And they made a resolution, unanimous approval by the Mashpee Tribal Council, to declare a state of emergency for the loss of herring and to impose a rights of nature for the herring to exist and thrive. And so now the youth have raised money, and they're continuing to raise money. They're going to work with, and the town of Mashpee has agreed, they're going to break down those concrete ladders and stairs and reconstruct them with sticks and natural elements and restore that population in Mashpee, Massachusetts. In 2022, the Sauk Seattle tribe in Washington sued the city of Seattle, naming salmon as the plaintiff and seeking a declaratory judgment affirming the rights of salmon to mitigate and to thrive. The parties reached a settlement, which meant it was viable, right? I think that means that. And so that the fish can now pass through their natural ecosystem. That's huge. That's big groundbreaking pieces here, because salmon, it feeds not just this tribe, feeds dozens and dozens of tribes. In 2020, the Menominee Indian tribe passed a resolution declaring that the Menominee River had the inherent and legal rights to exist naturally, flourish, evolve, and remain unpolluted and carry out its natural ecosystem functions. So we have a tribe here. I haven't seen any litigation on that, but I'm sure it's coming. Nez Perce in 2020 passed a resolution that recognizes the rights of the Snake River to exist and to regenerate. In 2019, the Yurok tribe passed a resolution granting rights to the Klamath River to exist, flourish, and naturally evolve, free from human-caused impacts. And I'm super excited about that, because when I was in law school, I clerked for the United States Department of Justice, and I worked on the water rights litigation for the Klamath River. I briefed 7 of the 42 cases, or matters in that case, all of which won, by the way, and allowed this river to happen. They started breaking down dams. If you Google Yurok, they are knocking down dams and they're restoring their fish populations. So this is all coming to great heads. 2018 White Earth, this last one I'll talk about. The White Earth Band in Minnesota, our neighbors here, established the rights of Manoomin via resolution, as you know, that translated into the 2024 effort in Minnesota that I mentioned earlier from the state government side. So as I wrap up, I just want to let you know, what can you expect going forward? What are you going to see in this next era? First, you're going to see the reemergence of Aboriginal traditional knowledge over natural ecosystems. Isn't that a beautiful thing? I'm so excited. I'm getting too old, though. I want to stick around another 100 years. More rights of nature laws passed in a variety of jurisdictions as a legal tool. You're going to see an increase of rights of nature coalitions and allyships. So you can see lots of nonprofits doing some amazing things. You're going to see an increase in research, development, and educational resources. I've worked for tribal governments, like I said, for decades, and a lot of their income relies on grants. And if you notice, what's not available is R&D for things such as this. These, for whatever reason, they don't exist or they've been blocked. We're very clear sometimes when traditional knowledge or indigeneity could be expanded or further developed, we notice a lack of funding to do that, right? And so this is a long problem, and that's why these things haven't been done. But as we push for that movement to send money down that vein so that these things can be done, the R&D can be done, The validation of oral histories can be done. The science can match that oral history. We can update all of that accordingly. That's where we need to spend our allyship and money, I think, in my own personal opinion. We're also going to see an increase in diversifying economic valuations of nature, feasibility and rights of nature modeling. Back to that economic mission, and I encourage you all to look at this law review article on what the value of an elephant is. Have you ever heard of this? This is groundbreaking. So how do we value nature, right? And there's a question that showed up down in Africa. And as you and I, if you're in the 40s and 50s, 60s of your age in life, you remember the value of elephants and ivory, and you hear about poaching and things like that. And you wonder, okay, if as an outsider, just plain Jane, what is the value of an elephant? What methodology? What do they look at from that intelligent creature and their ecosystem? Well, they don't look at that intelligent creature as an intelligent creature. They look at what does it produce and what value does it bring to the human happiness of joy, of owning tusks or to poach or to kill it, like that thrill. What is the value of that? And so what has happened in 2016, I believe the law review article came out, or between 2016 and 2019, if I remember right, you look at the value of the elephant, and it's actually called a pluralist approach. Let's not look at the elephant from the angle of what does it do just for the human being. Let's look at it, what does it do for other things? And they created an absolute economic model that goes in and values, like what does this one elephant mean to its family? What does it mean to the herd? What does it mean to the ecosystem? What happens when you pull it out? What happens there? If we pulled mom out of the house, what happens to that ecosystem, right? Looking at it from a different perspective and approach, and assigning values and economic values and methodologies to come up with an actual number. Maybe the elephant's now worth millions of dollars, but not dead, right? Alive and existing in its own ecosystem. So this is groundbreaking. And these are things, again, that will translate back to the World Economic Forum. There will be papers that will, obviously, these are all things to come, we can all expect, that will bring out models of things. Now, when we run out of trees, the tree that's standing down the way, is somebody going to want to knock it down and make toothpicks out of it? No, it's going to go up in the millions and millions and millions of value. So learning to value the tree now before we have a shortage will help balance out that economy and keep our economy more stable, right? That's the idea behind the economic analysis. So we'll see increasing diversifying economic valuations. You're going to see new models popping up. And if any of you are landowners, this is going to apply to you as well. What is that going to result in? Honestly, it's going to result in pushback, right? We're going to see a lot of pushback. Property owners and corporate entities that challenge rights of nature laws on all levels. They will challenge those legal protections. They will challenge every single piece of it, the guardian ward, whether or not this person is qualified as an expert or as an advocate for nature, whether that piece of nature even should be afforded the rights, whether it's constitutional at all. So there's going to be a major backlash if it's not already happening. That is definitely coming. You will also see the development of environmental laws on the local, regional, and federal and tribal spaces. So as there's pushback, the response will be, what can we do, right? The always question is when there's a catastrophe that happens in your life or a trauma, well, what can I do right now? And I can do these things, and passing local laws and things and getting community support and rallying from grassroots always is a common response, and it's commonly also successful. But we also want to make sure that we're clear that the next generation will impact global consciousness on the movement, and their approach and their effectiveness is key. So as we want to prepare them for what is to come, as we teach them how to study how the cards are falling and they're getting built back up, and some of the strategies along the way, that is really what is going to set precedents for what to expect in future generations. That's all I have for you, and it's a pleasure sharing a little bit about the movement. If you have any questions at all, you can certainly Google me. Again, I have a PowerPoint I can share with you on rights of nature that has active links. Happy to talk with you more, answer questions.